Hey there, it's Silver. This is the first chapter of Diluvian Ultra. So this is a neo-retro shooter that's going for something, well, really unusual just by appearances alone, but also its mechanics are pretty interesting as well. So first off, the way that it looks, something that you gotta mention because it's a really cool looking game. It's got this sort of, I would call it like a mid-2000s pulpy graphic novel slash comic book look to it. Like, you know, you're sort of like 2005 to 2008 era, like pulpy sci-fi novel. It's got really good, vibrant colors, especially lots of like purples, reds, greens, and yellows. And in fact, the color of projectiles is actually important, but we'll get onto that in a minute. Everything is quite strange and gory and gross and like biomechanical in a lot of ways, and it just looks really, really cool. I'm a sucker for like sci-fi body horror and the idea of like being so far into the future that it's like incomprehensibly distant from modern humanity and everything is just really different and weird. This is one of the reasons why I really like the tech priests from 40K, because they sort of represent that concept of being like so far into the future that humanity is like not even recognizable anymore, and this very much has that same kind of vibe to it. All of this crazy art style stuff doesn't only work for your enemies, though, it also extends to you. You are a very strange character indeed, a sort of immortal prince of Mars named Attila, who looks like a sort of rotting skeleton and has some really strange powers, including like some biomancy stuff, and even your weapons are really, really strange. They're a sort of mix of, you know, sci-fi weaponry, your crazy beams and steel and stuff like that, but also some biomechanical stuff, some weapons that are actually alive. And in fact, the overall look of the arsenal in this game so far reminds me a lot of Prey 2006, out of all things, which is, I mean, that's a really good thing to take inspiration from, if in fact they did, because the weapons in that game were awesome and really unique, and they definitely feel very unique here. And you'll notice that just using them, they all feel really weird. Like, none of them work exactly like how you would think. They all have kind of an odd feature to them, and that makes the overall arsenal of the game feel very unique to carry around. But the uniqueness of the arsenal is not actually where it ends, because this game uses a very strange health and armor system. In this game, armor is much, much more important than it is in a traditional shooter. You know, normally armor is nice to have. It helps to shave off some damage and keep your health gauge safe. But in this game, it's actually a requirement. So you'll notice in the bottom left of the screen there, your health gauge is actually like a sort of red vein-looking structure that represents your total health, and there's like a sort of yellow bone plating around it that represents your armor, and this is, for one, just a really cool way to represent health and armor, but it's also not just visual, because the way it works is there are two different damage types in this game. There's armor damage, which expectedly does damage to your armor gauge exclusively, and then there's lethal damage, which hits your health. Now, you can't have more armor than you have health, which means if you take health damage, lethal damage, then it still does decrease your armor by proxy, but the way that it works is whenever your armor is low, you can see that your health gauge is sort of exposed and flashes red. And if you ever take any lethal damage, it will chop off the entirety of the exposed health gauge segment all at once. This means that if you completely run out of armor, even if you're at full health, one hit will kill you. So the game is all about keeping this armor total up as much as possible, because the more of your health gauge is exposed, the more of it is going to be severed whenever you take the inevitable lethal damage that something throws at you and you don't dodge in time. So you've got to be very cautious about your resources in this game, because you might have like almost no armor and there's a ton of health pickups on the ground, which is nice because it gives you more health, but if you don't have any armor to cover up that health, then all of those health pickups could be wasted just by taking a single hit. So you might want to actually save those health pickups for later when you actually have some armor to pick up to actually protect it, because you wouldn't want to pick up like 30 health pickups and then lose them all to a single hit of damage. However, this is not only the case for you, because your enemies work this way as well. And doing lethal damage to enemies is of course a reliable way to kill them, but if you do armor damage to them first, eventually you'll see this sort of yellow shattering effect and they'll start flashing red. This means they have no armor left at all, so a single hit of lethal damage will kill them. And this is where your arsenal comes in. So you have an infinite ammo lethal damage weapon that's actually a bug called a Squire that's super adorable and is very reliable because you don't have to pick up ammo for it, but it does overheat if you fire it for too long. You just gotta pet it, just give it a little pet, and it'll be fine. But eventually you'll get things like this ion rifle that looks super cool that does exclusively armor damage, so it can't kill enemies, but it does reduce their armor very heavily and allow you to one-shot them with your infinite ammo bug friend, which is a very efficient way to do combat. And you also get some other pretty fun weapons like the plasma shotgun, which is interesting. The shotgun fires these sort of like rolling balls of plasma everywhere, so it's almost like an unexpectedly realistic depiction of plasma, and they turn red when you first fire them, so they'll do lethal damage up close, but as they travel, they'll turn yellow, so they'll start doing armor damage. So if you use the shotgun at a longer range, it will break enemies' armor, and then you get up close into their face, and it'll do lethal damage instead. So it's sort of a dual-use weapon, and it's really fun to use. You also get this crazy sort of machine gun thing that I honestly forget what it's called at the moment, but it is a rapid-fire weapon that does both types of damage, but in a specific way, so it shoots these really rapid armor damage shots. And you can use these to reduce the enemy armor really quickly, and then when you shoot it on a surface, not an enemy, it grows into this red crystal that shatters into a bunch of red crystal shards that will fly all around the place and do lethal damage. So you can sort of pepper enemies with it, and then spray a nearby surface and have all the crystals shoot all over the place and then kill everything. It's a really neat weapon, honestly. It's a cool idea for a weapon. And there are some others as well, like sometimes you'll find this thing called the Carnifex pistol. This is a limited use, it's almost like a power-up really, although I don't think it has a time limit, but it only lasts for 30 total shots, but it fires 5-shot bursts, so you can only pull the trigger 6 times, and then it's gone, but it's really, really powerful. So it's often found in like secrets or in out-of-the-way areas in large arenas in order to help you out. There are also bio grenades, which do lethal damage in a pretty good radius and are super nice to have, but you want to sort of amass a collection of them over the course of a level, because these are usually in like places you gotta jump to and stuff like that. You very rarely just find them laying around easily to obtain. You'll also sometimes find these purple blood drops around the place. These are blood points, and you want these. Once you get, I think it's 25 blood points, you get a focus point, which you spend at the checkpoint areas. You can find checkpoints all along the level. You activate them to respawn there when you die, and you can also activate them again once you have set that one in order to access the upgrades menu. And every weapon has 5 different upgrades, usually things like its damage and its fire rate and stuff like that, but also it'll have an alt fire that you have to upgrade in order to unlock. The alt fire are usually pretty cool. Like for instance, the bug's alt fire is actually, it helps to guide you through the level unexpectedly. You just toss the bug up into the air and it flies around and tells you where you should go, which is pretty cool. The level design can get pretty labyrinthine sometimes, so that is handy to actually have that. And there's also things like the plasma shotgun's alt fire, which actually has you detach the magazine and throw it like a grenade. And it does a bunch of armor damage depending on how full the magazine was at the time you threw it. And as well as just having resources like ammo and armor shards and health and stuff like that in hard-to-reach areas, blood points are the game's favorite thing to reward you for doing lots of jumping puzzles and platforming and stuff like that. So the areas do have a lot of verticality to them, and you do have a double jump by default, which is really nice. You also have an air dash. So you are pretty mobile in this game, and because of how much damage you take, you are encouraged to stay mobile in combat to keep from being hit. I'm currently playing through it on hard, and I've found that it's definitely very punishing, but it's all totally possible. I haven't found anything so far that I haven't been unable to complete after a couple extra tries. So you'll be leaping all around the levels and finding these blood points in order to amass some upgrades for yourself. However, there's one thing that I find kind of odd. The price for dying is 1 focus point. So whenever you die and respawn at a checkpoint, you actually lose one of your collected focus points. This feels really weird to me because I don't think you can get them back. Once you collect a blood point from the level, it's gone. Which means if you die and lose the focus point, then you can't get those back at all, so you lose the ability to get that upgrade point entirely, it seems like. This seems kind of counterintuitive to me, because surely the people that are dying a lot are the ones that need those upgrades to help make themselves stronger because they're having a hard time, but if they keep dying, then they won't be able to afford any of the upgrades. So it's a weird system. So far, I haven't been like totally screwed over by it because I've only died like maybe 4 or 5 times so far. I'm sure that'll go up later, but it is an odd choice to me to make these limited points something that you can actually permanently lose by dying. You do have a couple of other things as well. You have a blood sword that you can use, which is a nice infinite ammo melee weapon that's actually quite powerful. It does lethal damage and is just useful in general, so don't knock it. It is actually pretty handy to use. It also just looks really cool. You've also got a slam attack that you can use in midair, which is quite powerful as well, like unexpectedly so, and there's even a power-up that makes it kill everything on screen, but only for 1 use. The level design, I would say, overall is definitely a high point for the game because it's very complex with a lot of verticality, a lot of backtracking through previous arenas to unlock new doors and opening up the level slowly by having like a sort of large foyer kind of area that, you'll return to multiple times as you unlock more colored keys and stuff like that. It's just really good level design in my opinion, and the levels, for one, just look gorgeous because of the game's really cool art style, but also they're really fun to navigate, and I've never actually felt lost in this game. There have been a couple of points where I haven't known for sure where to go, but I've been able to find my way very quickly, and I have never had to like wander around a level for 20 minutes wondering what I'm supposed to do next. They're also very expansive, by the way. One level in this game usually takes me anywhere from around 30 to 60 minutes to complete, although some of that is me wandering around trying to find secrets, because there are a lot of secrets in this game, and they're very well worth finding, but they're all pretty hard to find, in my opinion. They tend to have really good stuff in them, though, because for one, you are starved of resources in this game pretty often, especially on hard, so finding more ammo and stuff is really nice, but also they can give you things like new weapons multiple levels before you would actually get them normally, so they're absolutely worth finding if you can. Enemy variety is limited in the first chapter, but pretty good. There aren't like a ton of them, but the ones that are here are actually fun to fight. And there are those rushy, explodey guys, which is important because every shooter needs those apparently, and they are very annoying, as they should be. And there's also a lot of different kinds of like marine and some other horrors and things to face, so the variety that's currently here has a good bit of personality and a fair bit of challenge to it. And overall, I just find the game really charming in general, because I think a game with a very body horror-esque art style could easily go like the ultra dark gritty route, and I wouldn't even mind that really, but this game decided not to do that, and instead decided to go for something very fantastical, very pulpy, very colorful, and I'm definitely all for that. I think it's a really cool design, and actually there's an unexpectedly large amount of story here. There's a lot of dialogue and stuff, which I was not expecting. They've clearly put a lot of thought into this world and how it works, and you're sort of slowly uncovering the mystery for yourself, like figuring out what you even are as a main character, as well as what these enemies are and why they're here and where you are and what's up with this tomb ship, which is the entire world of the game takes place on this tomb ship, which is like a sort of mixture of flesh and stone in all sorts of weird ways. It's a really cool setting, actually, and they've put a lot of effort into presenting it in this really interesting way that makes you curious for more. Now, I will say, if you're the kind of player that gets annoyed by games taking control away from you for a minute to show some dialogue, then you are going to have a problem here, because even though I don't mind that, and I tend to enjoy games like that because, well, I play a lot of RPGs, so I'm used to lots of dialogue, that doesn't bother me, but I do know that some people don't like that, and if you played something like Doom 2016 and you were annoyed by how the game sometimes sort of took control away from you and had you watch like an in-game cutscene, this game does do that relatively frequently. I would say probably about twice per level minimum it does something like that, so if that is a problem for you, that's something I should point out, but I do think that the story is well told so far. It's implemented in such a way that actually makes it very interesting and rewarding to learn more about. There's a lot of neat stuff going on here that I want to know more about, so I don't mind the dialogue, but you know, like I said, it's something that I feel the need to mention just in case. There are a couple of small downsides I want to mention as well, just because they're things that could be relatively easily fixed, and since this is the sort of game that is only the first chapter of a multi-chapter experience, it makes sense to actually point these out now. For one, I think the hitboxes are really weird in this game. Some of the enemies have hitboxes that seem very small compared to their sprites, like projectiles will just go through them without damaging them relatively frequently. This happens with smaller enemies a lot more often than larger ones, especially the little blob guys. Those guys are really hard to hit sometimes. Projectiles and beams will just go right through them. Also, I've noticed that the collision on the edges of level geometry seems to extend quite a bit farther than you would think oftentimes, so you end up shooting the air sometimes when you're trying to shoot around corners. I think that maybe some of the corners and other bits of geometry need to be hemmed in a little bit in terms of their collision, because you can end up trying to shoot around like a narrow passage or something and end up just shooting the air where there shouldn't be anything to hit. This also extends, by the way, to the explosions. I don't understand the explosive hitboxes in this game at all. Explosions seem to do damage way, way farther out than the actual animation of the explosion itself. The animation is a lie. It doesn't really matter how big it is. It seems to damage you like 5 times the distance away than you would expect. I'm not sure what's up with that. I don't know if that's a bug or if that's actually intended and explosions are supposed to be super huge, but if they are, then I would recommend updating the shockwave or something so that it looks more in line with how big the actual damage radius is. And there's one bug, one specific bug that I experienced. I haven't really experienced any others, which is nice. It feels quite well polished, so this is the only thing. When you die and respawn, your mouse sensitivity gets reset. It doesn't reset in the menu. The slider will be where it is supposed to be, but it does reset in-game and you have to go back. All you've got to do is click the slider. You don't have to move it, just click it, and it'll reset back to wherever you set it. You just have to do this every time you respawn. I'm sure that'll be something that's relatively easily fixable though, so yeah, that's my current look at the first chapter of Diluvian Ultra. It is a fantastically interesting game with a really cool setting and a wonderful art style, some satisfying combat with very, like, pre-2006 inspired weaponry, which we need more of in the industry, I feel, and definitely something that I want to learn more about and keep playing. This is definitely setting up its future chapters to be very, very interesting indeed. So I'll put the link in the description below this video to the Steam store page so that you can go and check it out yourself, maybe wishlist it, or indeed buy it if you wish. Thank you guys very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.